Imagine you've been living in this house for a few years.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And you love the neighborhood, the foundation is totally solid, and you hold this predictable 16-year lease.
Oh, that's great. Absolute peace of mind.
Exactly. Gives you total peace of mind. You know what your rent is. You know the rules. You can comfortably plan a whole decade into your future.
Right, you're set.
But then, right when it's time to formally sign on for the next 16 years, your landlord abruptly slides a new piece of paper across the table.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And they just say, well, we're switching to a month-to-month, year-to-year contract. I need to review this arrangement annually.
Wow. I mean, the ability to plan long-term just evaporates instantly right there.
It really
You're
does.
suddenly living in this constant, rolling state of negotiation.
And that is the exact position the North American economy is in right now. Because the United States just refused to automatically renew the massive Canada-United States-Mexico agreement.
Which most people probably know as AUSMA or the USMCA.
Right, exactly. So today, for you listening, we are doing a deep dive into a massive stack of sources. We've got local and national Canadian reporting from Discover Moose Jaw, CHCH, CTV, Global News, and 650 CKOM.
We also have international perspectives in there too, right?
Yes, from Al Jazeera and the BBC. Plus, we're pulling some really hard economic data from RDC Economics, Oxford Economics, and the Peterson Institute.
That is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But our mission for this deep dive is to figure out why the U.S. just tore up that 16-year lease, what mechanical reality actually replaces it, and why a move that really should have caused a continental political explosion has been, well, surprisingly quiet.
Yeah, the silence has been kind of wild. But I think to understand the sheer scale of what happened on that July 1st deadline, we really have to look at the internal architecture of the agreement itself.
Okay, break that down for us.
So when this trade pact was originally negotiated to replace NAFTA, they wrote a specific sunset clause into the text.
A sunset clause.
Right. Meaning that by July 1st, 2026, all three countries had to explicitly declare whether they wanted to extend the deal for another full 16-year term.
And obviously Canada and Mexico wanted that, right?
Oh, unequivocally.
Yeah.
They wanted that standard extension because it provides the bedrock stability that these massive continental supply chains require.
Makes total sense.
But following a virtual meeting with his counterparts, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer announced the U.S. will not rubber stamp the agreement in its current form.
And he didn't just casually decline either. I mean,
Yeah.
the U.S. office actually released a very specific list of what they called shortcomings and irritants.
Yeah, they were very specific.
They pointed really heavily at Canada's supply management system, like specifically how it strictly controls dairy market access and, well, limits American farmers.
Right, the dairy issue is always a sticking point.
Always. And they also called out Canadian liquor policies and the Online Streaming Act.
Oh, the Online Streaming Act is a massive friction point.
Why is that one such a big deal?
Because it essentially forces American streaming giants to financially subsidize Canadian domestic content. And the U.S. views that as a direct penalty on American tech companies.
Ah, okay, so they feel targeted.
Exactly. But looking beyond just those domestic policies, the U.S. is really intensely focused on global supply chain leakage.
Supply chain leakage, meaning what exactly?
Basically, they're arguing that third-party countries, and they chiefly mean China here, are using Mexico and Canada as backdoors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the fear is that Chinese firms are setting up shop just across the border to exploit the Free Trade Pact, to flood the American market with cheap electric vehicles and manufactured goods without paying U.S. tariffs.
Right, sneaking in the side door. But, okay, if the U.S. is outright refusing to sign the 16-year extension over all these grievances, I imagine the immediate question for anyone listening who runs a business or manages a portfolio is, well, is the deal effectively dead?
Right, that's the natural fear.
Like, does trade just grind to a halt tomorrow?
No, absolutely not. The deal remains fully operational today.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah, the refusal doesn't trigger an immediate cancellation. What it does is it triggers a completely different mechanism that was built into the pact. It's this annual review process coupled with a 10-year shot clock.
A shot clock, like in basketball.
Kinda, yeah. Because the U.S. withheld that 16-year signature, the clock just starts ticking toward a potential hard termination date in 2036.
I see.
And more importantly, it forces the three nations to convene every single year to debate, review, and negotiate structural changes.
Wow. It sounds a bit like a corporate board putting a CEO on a rolling, 1-year performance improvement plan.
That is a great analogy.
'Cause, like, they aren't firing them today, but the threat of termination is just sitting on the desk every single quarter. It makes it impossible to confidently launch a 5-year project.
Exactly. And Michael Harvey, he's the executive director of the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance. He framed this for producers not as a reason to panic, but really as a calculated maneuver.
A maneuver by the U.S., you mean?
Right. He views this less as an impending collapse and more as this raw negotiating tactic by Washington to just keep its partners off balance.
He really hit the nail on the head there.
He did. The core objective behind forcing this shift to annual reviews is leverage.
Right, leverage.
By creating a perpetual state of uncertainty, the U.S. gains a structural advantage in what has, already escalated into a brutal 18-month trade war across the continent.
Yeah, let's actually look at the mechanics of that trade war. And I think it's worth noting right here, just to you listening, because the rhetoric coming from both left and right-wing figures in our sources is incredibly heated.
Oh, absolutely. Very charged language.
Extremely charged. So we need to explicitly state that we are setting all the politics aside.
Yeah.
We are not taking any sides or endorsing any political viewpoints today.
Right. We're just looking impartially at the economic tools Washington is wielding.
Exactly. Strictly the facts. And the primary weapon being deployed by the administration right now is aggressive unilateral tariffs.
And, the scale of these tariffs is pretty much unprecedented in modern North American trade.
How so?
Well, the U.S. administration has aggressively utilized Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act.
Section 232, what does that allow them to do?
It's a provision that allows the executive branch to penalize imports if they allegedly threaten U.S. national security.
National security.
Yeah, and using that specific national security justification, they leveled 50% tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and copper.
50%. That is massive.
It is, alongside a really severe 25% tariff on any non-U.S. content in automobiles. And they also added a 10% tax on certain lumber products.
Wow. But the administration also tried to push beyond just those targeted sectors, right? They tried to impose sweeping global tariffs, which triggered this massive legal battle in the background.
They did, yeah. They initially tried to use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to unilaterally tax almost everything coming in.
But that IEPA strategy completely fell apart in February.
It did. The U.S. Supreme Court struck it down.
Right.
The court essentially ruled that IEPA was designed by Congress for literal national emergencies, like cutting off funding to terrorist networks or rogue states.
Not for managing standard trade deficits with your closest allies.
Exactly. Not for managing structural trade deficits.
I'm really stuck on how the administration reacted to that Supreme Court ruling, though, because they didn't just abandon the global tariff strategy.
No, not at all.
They just found a dustier law to use.
That's a good way to put it. They immediately pivoted to Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act.
Okay, Section 122.
It's this very specific, really rarely used legal mechanism that was designed to address large and serious balance of payments deficits.
So they just swapped the legal justification.
Yep. By invoking Section 122, the White House just bypassed the Supreme Court's block entirely and instantly slapped a 10% global tariff on imports.
Unbelievable.
But the critical limitation of Section 122 is that it is strictly temporary. By law, these tariffs actually expire after 150 days.
Wait, 150 days. That brings us right to, what, July 24th?
Yeah, mid-July. And they are threatening to raise it to 15% before it expires.
Aren't they seriously trying to manage continental trade policy through 150-day legal loopholes? I mean, you can't govern a multi-trillion-dollar supply chain in 5-month increments unless the goal is to intentionally break the system.
Well, breaking the predictability of this system is the entire point.
Really?
Yeah, Andrew Hale, he's a fellow at Advancing American Freedom. He analyzed this whole strategy and concluded it is literally designed to actively sow chaos.
So chaos is a strategy.
Yes, by governing through temporary loopholes and constantly pushing trading partners to the absolute edge of the cliff, the administration prevents foreign manufacturers from ever feeling secure.
Oh, I see. So the logic is that if it's too chaotic to manufacture in Mexico or Canada, companies will just eventually give up and build their factories in Ohio or Texas?
That's exactly the playbook.
And clearly that strategy has domestic cheerleaders. The BBC reporting highlighted that groups like the American Iron and Steel Institute are actually thrilled with the shift to annual reviews.
They really are.
They believe this continuous, chaotic leverage is the only force strong enough to rewrite the rules of continental manufacturing in America's favor.
It's an aggressive gamble, for sure. It's meant to close the U.S. trade deficit by forcing capital back within American borders.
Right. But if the entire goal of this manufactured chaos and these really heavy tariffs is to force manufacturing back home and close that trade deficit, the economic data should reflect that victory.
You would think so, yes.
But when we actually pull the numbers from RBC Economics, we see the exact opposite happening. The strategy appears to be completely backfiring.
It really does.
According to the Advanced Goods Report, the U.S. goods deficit just hit a 14-month high of $105.8 billion in May.
And this is the massive economic paradox at the very center of our deep dive today. The U.S. is imposing some of the steepest import penalties in modern history, yet they are importing more foreign goods than ever before.
Wait, I don't get it. A 10 or 15% tariff on billions of dollars of imported goods is a devastating hit to a company's bottom line.
Huge hit.
Why aren't these massive American corporations lobbying to kill these tariffs or simply moving their procurement to domestic suppliers to just avoid the tax?
Because they can't.
Yeah.
We are currently in the middle of a technological revolution that is completely overriding traditional trade policy.
Oh, you mean the artificial intelligence boom?
Exactly. The AI boom. The physical build-out for AI infrastructure, hyperscale data centers, highly specialized microchips, advanced cooling systems.
Right.
It requires this ravenous, unprecedented appetite for capital goods.
Right.
You cannot simply source a trillion-dollar AI data center from local American suppliers overnight.
Because the specialized silicon foundries and the electronics manufacturing bases largely exist outside the U.S.
Yes, exactly.
So the demand for these specific components is so inelastic that tech giants essentially have no choice but to swallow the 15% tariff penalty just to get their hands on the hardware before their competitors do.
That's exactly. And the RBC data confirms this. Almost 30% of all U.S. goods imports are now computers and electronics.
30%? That's huge.
It is. That share has doubled since prior to 2024. And real capital goods imports rose 3.2% in April alone.
Wow.
So we aren't just looking at price inflation making the imports look more expensive. The actual physical volume of electronic hardware crossing the border is surging, despite the tariffs.
So the U.S. is essentially taxing itself on the exact hardware it desperately needs to win the global AI race,
Pretty much.
while simultaneously failing to close the trade deficit it set out to fix in the first place.
Yeah, it's quite the paradox.
And if this leverage game actually goes wrong and they end up terminating the trade agreement, the blowback on the U.S. economy would be catastrophic.
Oh, completely.
The Peterson Institute of International Economics data shows how deeply vulnerable American states are to retaliation. Last year, North Dakota sent 89.9% of all its exports to Canada and Mexico.
Wow.
Michigan sent 64.9%. Iowa relies on them for 50% of its export market.
I mean, you cannot just replace 90% of a state's export economy. You just can't.
No, it's impossible.
And the integration goes so far beyond raw materials. U.S. exports of auto parts and aircraft to Canada and Mexico generate over $10 billion annually.
$10 billion.
Yeah, and more than 75% of all U.S. exports of parts for tractors, public transport, and cars go to these two neighboring countries.
That is massive dependence.
It is. Gary Huffbauer from the Peterson Institute issued a really stark warning about this. He said terminating this deal would severely damage U.S. exports.
Right, because of retaliation.
Exactly. If the U.S. walks away, Canada and Mexico will inevitably retaliate with reciprocal tariffs, and they'll just shift their supply chains to European or Asian markets, potentially locking American manufacturers out of their closest and most lucrative markets permanently.
Okay, so if the economic stakes are essentially mutually assured destruction and entire state economies hang in the balance, why'd the July 1st deadline pass with a whimper?
It is surprising, right?
Yeah. I mean, everyone tracking North American trade was bracing for a fiery political showdown and months of turbulent headlines. Instead, the U.S. refused to sign the lease during a quiet, virtual Zoom meeting, and the political fallout barely made a ripple.
Well, the answer to that mystery lies entirely outside of North America.
Really? Where?
BBC reporting provides the geopolitical context that explains the silence. Basically, Washington is entirely consumed by the war with Iran.
Oh, right. The war with Iran.
Yeah. The sheer magnitude, the complexity, and the danger of that conflict have completely absorbed the White House's attention, their military resources, and their political bandwidth.
There is simply no room left on the president's desk for a massive performative trade war with their closest neighbors.
Exactly.
It is incredible to think that a historic shift in North American trade policy only happened quietly because there is a literal war happening on the other side of the planet.
It's wild. But it goes beyond just being distracted by Iran, doesn't it? The U.S. structurally needs Canada and Mexico right now.
Oh, they need them desperately.
Why is that?
Because the broader grand strategy of the United States involves fundamentally recalibrating its relationship with China, which means nearshoring manufacturing and securing critical mineral supply chains closer to home.
Right, building a fortress economy.
Exactly. You cannot successfully decouple your economy from a rival superpower in Asia if you are simultaneously fighting a bitter, chaotic trade war with the two allies sharing your continental borders.
That makes total sense. You need Mexico's manufacturing capacity and Canada's natural resources.
Exactly. And Arturo Suricon, the former Mexican ambassador to the U.S., he captured this perfectly in an interview with Al Jazeera.
What did he say?
He pointed out that picking a massive trade fight with your own integrated supply chain right now would be, in World Cup terms, a huge own goal. You don't burn down your neighborhood while trying to secure the perimeter.
A huge own goal. That is a great way to phrase it. And, U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer has even hinted that the administration feels they don't actually need a loud confrontational approach at this specific moment.
Why not?
Their view is that the aggressive tariff strategy over the last 18 months has already fundamentally altered the economic gravity in North America.
So they think they've already won.
Basically, they believe they have successfully established dominance and leverage. So that allows them to shift the trade pact into this quiet, rolling annual review process without needing to, publicly bang their fists on the table.
Okay, so Washington gets its perpetual leverage, and they get to keep their focus on Iran and China. But how are Canada and Mexico reacting to being put on a rolling 10-year shot clock?
Well, the public diplomatic posturing is very different from the internal political reality.
Let's start with Canada.
In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney has really attempted to project control and sort of downplay the severity of the friction. He categorized the U.S. complaints against Mexico as technical issues, while admitting the U.S. has deeper structural issues with Canada.
Structural issues being a polite way to talk about the crushing tariffs on the auto, steel, aluminum, and forestry sectors.
Right, a very diplomatic phrase. But Canadian Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc has drawn a pretty hard line in a letter to his counterparts.
Oh, really? What did he say?
He made it clear that Canada's singular priority is the removal of those sectoral tariffs. His stance is essentially that Canada cannot be expected to sit down and modernize a trade framework in good faith while the U.S. is actively taxing the foundation of the Canadian industrial economy.
I mean, that is a very fair point.
It is. But projecting calm diplomatically isn't translating to domestic political peace in Canada.
No.
Not at all. The Canadian government is facing fierce, organized criticism internally. Conservative trade critic Shiv Majumdar publicly blasted the administration's passive approach.
What's his argument?
He pointed out that this isn't just an abstract policy debate, right? Millions of Canadians are living in deep, tangible uncertainty.
Right.
Businesses just don't know how to price their goods or whether they will even have access to the U.S. market next year. He demanded to know why Canada hasn't launched aggressive, official bilateral negotiations with the U.S. yet.
Especially when Mexico already has dates set for direct talks.
Exactly.
And Mexico seems to be playing a very careful balancing act here. Mexico's Secretary of Economy, Marcelo Ebrard, actually released a video statement emphasizing that Mexico is not going to rush into a bad reactionary deal just to appease Washington.
Good for them.
But, he didn't hide their frustration. He stated really clearly that Mexico hates the uncertainty that comes with prolonged annual reviews.
And that word right there, uncertainty, that is the defining theme for the experts analyzing this entire shift.
Uncertainty.
Yeah. Carlo Dade from the University of Calgary School of Public Policy, he observed that the market isn't even waiting for a resolution anymore. It is simply adjusting to a, quote, new normal of uncertainty.
Wow, a new normal of uncertainty. But adapting to that carries a massive real-world cost.
Huge cost.
Tony Stillo, he's the director of Canada Economics at Oxford Economics, and Veena Najibullah from the Asia-Pacific Foundation, they both issued really stark warnings about how this rolling review process creates a massive headwind for capital expenditure.
Oh, I bet.
Right, because when a business is staring at a 10-year shot clock ticking down to termination and annual reviews that can arbitrarily rewrite the rules of cross-border commerce, well, they just freeze.
You don't invest hundreds of millions into a new factory or expand a supply chain into a neighboring country if you have no idea what the tariff rate will be in 12 months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Both of those experts agree that Canada, a nation that historically sent nearly 80% of all its exports south to the U.S., now faces an urgent existential mandate to diversify its global trading partners.
The era of relying entirely on the predictability of the American market is just over.
It's completely over. If you are running a business right now, managing a supply chain, or even just investing your savings in North American equities, Michael Harvey's warning from earlier is really the ultimate takeaway here.
Remind me what he said.
He said, instability is the enemy of good trade planning. You are now navigating a reality where the foundational rules of continental trade are written in pencil, ready to be erased and rewritten every single year.
It forces a complete recalculation of risk for every board of directors on the continent.
It really does.
I mean, the era of politicians signing a massive trade deal, shaking hands, and just putting it on a shelf to gather dust for a couple of decades is officially dead. We have entered an era of perpetual, active, and combative trade management.
So let's quickly retrace the mechanics of what we've uncovered today for you listening. First, the U.S. effectively paused the standard 16-year renewal of the continent's most important trade agreement.
Right.
In its place, they forced a 10-year shot clock and an annual review process to maintain maximum negotiating leverage over Canada and Mexico.
Yep.
But then we saw how an explosive, unavoidable AI hardware boom is completely absorbing the intended penalties of U.S. tariffs, which is causing the trade deficit to actually widen instead of shrink.
That paradox is fascinating.
And finally, we solved the mystery of why this historic economic shift happened so quietly. A geopolitical war in Iran has completely consumed Washington's bandwidth, forcing the U.S. to play nice with the neighbors they really rely on for their broader strategy against China.
It is a stunning collision of advanced technology, shifting geopolitics, and aggressive trade policy.
It really is.
And looking at all these moving pieces, it leaves us with a really critical structural question about the future.
What's that?
Well, because sudden geopolitical conflict in the Middle East and the explosive, uncontrollable physical demands of the artificial intelligence boom are what is actually dictating the reality of North American trade right now. Are traditional, static trade agreements becoming entirely obsolete?
That is exactly the kind of provocative thought you have to ask when the ground is moving this fast beneath our feet. I mean, are we trying to regulate a modern, lightning-fast global supply chain with slow, bureaucratic tools built for a completely different century? It is definitely something for you to mull over as you watch the markets this week. Your landlord just tore up the 16-year lease, and the entire continent is now living month to month. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.